What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka New York Prepper, and today I wanted to talk to you guys about the three categories of prepping, or the three types of preps that if you're a prepper, you need to make sure that you prepare in all three of these categories. And I don't think a lot of preppers really think about prepping in this way. Or they may think about it subconsciously, but they don't actually divide it into categories like I'm going to do for you guys now. So, you have the three categories of preps or prepping, and they're physical preps, mental preps, and spiritual preps. So you have physical prepping, mental prepping, and spiritual prepping. So most people, when they think of preppers, they think of physical prepping. People who hoard, stockpiles of ammunition and have, 50 different guns and 3 years worth of food and a rainwater catchment system. That's what most people think of physical prepping. That's what, when if you ask like the average Joe on the street of, a big city somewhere, Times Square, and you say, what do you know about preppers? They're gonna typically associate some guy who is afraid of the end of the world, and he's stockpiling ammo and food, and he's building bunkers, and that would be the physical prepping component of prepping. Like I said, there's three different components. So you have the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. And I think a lot of preppers are deficient in the mental and the spiritual part of prepping. So I think everybody, when they decide to become a prepper at some point in their life, for whatever reason, everybody has different reasons for getting into prepping. Some people experienced a really bad natural disaster. Let's say if they lived in hurricane country, Florida or the Carolinas, or somewhere in the southeastern United States. They live in a hurricane-prone area. Maybe they lived through Katrina. Maybe they lived through Irma, or Hurricane Andrew, Hurricane Harvey. That might have motivated somebody to think about starting to prepare. And they said, okay, I need some extra batteries, I need some extra food in the pantry, I need some extra water bottles laying around. I can't just only have, 1 week's worth of food and just, live on whatever is at the grocery store. I can't be reliant on the grid. I need flashlights, etc. Some people, it's, a terrorist attack, or, something else, So everybody has different motivations for why they got into prepping, or certain trigger events. But most people, when they start prepping, they first focus only on the physical preps, and that's how you can determine if somebody is a newbie prepper and a seasoned prepper, or more of a veteran prepper. Because the newbie preppers will just immediately go after the sexy stuff, I got to get, 6 different AR-15s, and I have to have, 10 different pistols, and I got to have, 5,000 rounds of ammo, because, I may have to, go without ammo for 3 years, and I need to make sure I have enough ammo. And all those things are fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a lot more to prepping than just how much ammo you have, how many guns you have, how much physical resources you have. There's a lot more that goes into prepping than just your physical resources. So like most physical preps, would be like food storage, water storage, clothing, shelter, any kind of self-defense tools, knives, medical stuff, tourniquets, Band-Aids, Tylenol, rubbing alcohol, sanitation supplies, bleach, vinegar, anything related to sanitation. Those are physical preps, building materials, sandbags, plywood, what else? bricks, whatever, cinder blocks. It's always good to have, building materials on hand if after SHTF, for whatever reason, you need to build something or you need to create fortified, improvised shooting, positions for defense of your property. It's always good to have building materials, fuel, gasoline, diesel fuel, propane, whatever, kerosene, anything that you would need for bartering, silver, gold. Those are what I call physical preps because they're physical, tangible things that you can touch with your hand. And if you look to the side over here, you'll see some physical preps of mine. I have some of these Craftsman totes, these 20-gallon containers, which you can stack on top of each other, and I have a bunch of my preps in here. But this would be an example of a physical prep, 12 gauge shotgun, that's a physical prep. Ammunition, here I have some shells, 12 gauge shells. Here I have right behind me here I have some freeze-dried oats. I have propane, I have vinegar, I have isobutane. These are just some examples of physical preps. And everybody, when they become a prepper, they immediately go to the physical stuff. I need food, I don't have enough food, I need, lanterns, I need flashlights, I need guns, I need batteries, man, I don't have anything. And so people get crazy over the physical stuff and they neglect the mental and the spiritual side of prepping, which could arguably be even more important than the physical side. Because the thing is that physical resources can always be replaced, so, like this shotgun over here, if I lose this shotgun or something happens to it, I can replace this. This is replaceable. This is a degradable resource that will break down and rust into nothing over time. I can find another shotgun. I can, scavenge one somewhere. I can buy another one, whatever. I can barter for one. So physical resources can be replaced. However, mental preps are something that you can't necessarily replace once the grid goes down. So, let me give you an example of that. So, and another thing too is like with physical resources, if I don't have a physical resource, I can always obtain it after SHTF, so I can scavenge for food, I can scavenge for water, I can find fuel somewhere, I could punch a gasoline tank, with a screwdriver, or siphon it out somewhere from a abandoned gas station or abandoned vehicles. So you can always obtain physical resources after SHTF, but it's much more difficult to obtain a mental or spiritual prep after SHTF. So like, here's an example of some mental preps or mental prepping that I made. So obviously mental preps are one of the things that I believe pretty much most preppers overlook or neglect, especially the newbies. And some of these mental preps I would say are skills. So some of the mental preps would be like a gunsmithing. These are just an example of some important mental preps that I think a lot of people neglect. So you have gunsmithing. You need to be able to understand how to fix firearms, especially after SHTF, because if something breaks, you're not going to be able to just go online and order a new one. You're not going to be able to go to your local gunsmith and drop it off for a week or two. You're going to have to figure it out yourself. And, now's the time to learn how to do that before the grid goes down. Because once the grid goes down, you're not going to have access to books, to, the internet, YouTube, to research, how to fix things and how things work. So, gunsmithing, reloading and hand loading, ballistics, long-range shooting, pistol shooting, hand-to-hand combat and self-defense, fire building, survival, any kind of skill is a mental prep, because skills are, you have to learn it, and it stays inside of your head. So it's mental, so skills and knowledge, they go hand in hand. So another thing aside from just skills is knowledge. Having good knowledge will help you a lot, because if you know about, let's say, wild edibles, or how to survive different types of plants that you can eat, knowledge of the climate in certain areas, knowledge can be a very important thing, and that's why reading is a really good thing to do, because the more you know, the more powerful you are, and the more able you are to survive different situations. So skills, knowledge, are two big mental preps that I think a lot of guys overlook. Like, I personally have friends of mine that buy so many guns, but they don't have time to shoot them. Because if you have 10 different guns, how are you going to have time to shoot every single gun and spend, enough time with each gun to become proficient with them and to understand the nuances of every single firearm, understanding the ballistics of each cartridge in that firearm, understanding how they're put together, just getting used to how they feel and the muscle memory. If you have 10 different firearms, you're not going to have a chance to do that. But skills, knowledge, some of the good things to know is like medicine, emergency medicine especially, edible plants and wild edibles, knowledge of game animals and knowledge of wilderness survival skills, knowledge of knots, how to tie different knots. These are things that a lot of guys overlook, because they go right for they buy all these guns and they buy all these preps, but they don't learn how to actually use it. They don't spend enough time to actually use it, because they're kind of like kids in a toy store, like when you were a kid and you see this nice toy and you want to have it, but it's kind of the same thing, but you need to actually spend the time to learn the skills in order to use those preps and to be good with them. And you need to have knowledge too. Like I said, you need to have knowledge of ballistics, knowledge of gunsmithing, reloading, building fires, survival. Another thing too is critical thinking skills. And this is something that's also fading away with our society. People don't think critically anymore. We're encouraged to take everything at face value. And that's very dangerous, especially in SHTF, because after SHTF, everybody is going to have a hidden agenda. Most people will have a hidden agenda that you come across. So you have to be able to analyze things from a deeper level. You can't just look at something and think that whatever you see is what exactly is happening, or whatever somebody says to you is what they actually mean. And I think after, we see this now during rule of law, where people will lie to you. It could be anything. You could have your spouse lying to you about why she went out, to dinner a couple of nights ago. You may have your somebody can lie to you about how much they're going to pay you in a job, or what you're going to be doing in the job. Somebody could sell you a house and there's all kinds of problems with it. And then you buy it and you have to spend, as much money as the house worth just to make it functional. So, you have to analyze things from a deeper level. You have to think critically. Don't just take things at face value. Don't be naive, because that's what human nature is. Human beings, we look for weakness in other people and in other things that we can take advantage of. It's just a survival trait, and people will see naiveness, like just like today, if you see someone who's really naive and he doesn't know what's going on, it stands out like a sore thumb. Unless you're also a naive person too, then you're not going to see someone else's naiveness. But after SHTF, people are going to be very much more ruthless, because there's going to be a strain on resources. So you have to always analyze things from a deeper level. don't just take things at face value. Um, if it's a certain type of situation or something that somebody's telling you, don't just accept it for what it is. Try to think, what other angles there are in the situation and stuff like that. So don't take things at face value and think critically. That's very important. Mental prep is practicing your critical thinking skills, and you can practice that now. Just anytime you're talking to a friend of yours or a coworker, and they're telling you something, don't just take what they say, at face value. Try to see if there's any other angles or something. Always think critically. So, and if there's any news in the mainstream media, don't just accept what the media says. Think deeper than what they tell you. Another thing too is wargaming and having analytical skills. Being able to war game and analyze things is very important. I don't think that's a lot of preppers don't really do that. And what I mean by war gaming is like, figuring out what scenarios you could potentially face after SHTF. And then once you figure out those scenarios, then you can figure out what preps you need and what plans you need to mitigate those potential threats, or protect yourself from those threats. So wargaming is a big one, and that's also a mental prep. Because the more scenarios you can think of in your head, and the more kind of situations that you think about, the better prepared you're going to be, because you can prepare for all different types of contingencies and different scenarios, versus like the average person or the average prepper is only thinking about like one thing. It may be like FEMA camps and martial law, or they may only see things in a very black and white way, versus SHTF. Not everything is going to be black and white. There's going to be all kinds of shades of gray, and so you have to war game all these different scenarios that could potentially take place. And then think about how you would handle it. For example, how would you handle if somebody in your family was a traitor? What if your brother or your child was a traitor to your family and maybe gave some information out to a rival prepper group or a rival survival group, or some type of a group of marauders, and then they come and they attack you? How would you handle that? Or think outside of the box. Don't just think conventionally. That's another mental prep, I would say, is thinking outside of the box. And then obviously analytical skills are important. So you can analyze something that's happening, which kind of goes along with critical thinking. Being able to analyze different situations as they're occurring, and then being able to figure out how to respond to them relatively quickly. So like if something happens, let's say you have a bunch of marauders that are attacking your compound or whatever, your bug out location, your home, you need to be able to figure out a way to respond to that quickly. And that's where the analytical skills come into play. And then finally, what I think is probably one of the most important aspects of mental prepping and mental preps would be mental resiliency or mental toughness. So what I mean by mental resiliency is being able to overcome difficult situations such as fear, loss of loved ones, physical discomfort or pain, and loneliness. And I recently did a video on loneliness after SHTF, and how you would handle being alone if you had to be alone for long periods of time. And this is where mental resiliency comes into play. If you've been pampered your whole life and everybody's given everything to you on a silver spoon all the time, and you never had to actually endure any kind of difficulties, SHTF is going to be very hard for you, because SHTF will be unlike anything we've ever encountered before. Depending on the level of severity of the SHTF, so, you have to be able to overcome, difficult situations without, panicking, or without being paralyzed in fear, or paralyzed in grief, or being paralyzed in loneliness, or paralyzed in depression, paralyzed in anxiety. You have to be able to overcome those mental difficulties that you're going to face after SHTF. And I would say that's a very important thing that a lot of people don't think about, because you could have all the preps in the world and you could have the best bug out location, but if you're not mentally right in your head and you start losing it and you start going crazy, it's all for nothing. There's all that stuff that you prepared for, it's all useless. Somebody else is going to come and take it, or it's going to, the rats are going to eat all your food while you're, paralyzed with fear and depression or something like that. So mental toughness and mental resiliency are critical. And obviously it's going to be hard if you, encounter some type of traumatic situation that you've never encountered before. Like the loss of a loved one, that could be enough to have somebody just totally give up after SHTF. That may, that will take the fight out of a lot of people. Seeing a loved one die, that'll make people give up. But you have to make sure you don't give up, and you have to find something inside of you that tells you to push on, and not let that death go to waste, and be able to move forward, and then finally is the spiritual preps, which, I think also a lot of preppers neglect the spiritual aspects of prepping too, because I think a lot of preppers, they want to be able to survive SHTF just through physical means, by having enough food, having enough ammo, having enough water, and of course you need a certain amount of provisions in order to survive SHTF. But there's a lot of things that are beyond our control, and if you put all your hope into physical things, you're going to be very disappointed after SHTF, because we have all these plans and we have all these preps about how we want to do things and how things are going to go, and we have different strategies and plans for handling different scenarios, but it may not unfold the way that we want it to. We may have all these great plans to bug out into the mountains in our cabin somewhere, but what happens if your vehicle breaks down on the way? Or what happens if somebody in your family gets sick with some type of really bad flu or something? So there's going to be things that you can't physically prepare for, and it's just physically impossible for us to get all the amount of food and ammo we need and everything we need just by preparing physically. We need to have spiritual preps, and what I'm saying spiritual preps, I mean putting your faith in God and trusting in God to protect you in situations where, you have to be able to come to terms with the fact that you're not going to be able to control everything. There's things that are beyond your control, and you have to be able to take all of your worries and your fears and everything else, and you have to give it to God and give it to Jesus Christ. And that's just me personally, because I'm a Christian, and a lot of the people that watch my channel are Christians. Most of the people that are on my channel are Christian faith. So if you guys are Christian and you're watching my videos, don't forget about the putting your faith in God, because God will ultimately, He's the Savior, and He's not going to let bad things happen to you. So you have to remember to trust God and trust Jesus, and He will, save you from different situations after SHTF. So, don't forget about that aspect. And, finally, I did a video about loneliness after SHTF and how you would handle loneliness. And again, having faith in God and Jesus Christ. will help you with any kind of loneliness. So, that's pretty much it for this video. It was nice to have this little discussion with you guys. I hope that you got something from this and kind of made the gears turn inside your head a little bit. So, to sum it up, don't just put all your effort into your physical preps. Put some effort into your mental preps and your spiritual preps. Like I said, mental preps include different types of skills, knowledge. Increase your knowledge. Practice your critical thinking skills. Practice your wargaming and analytical skills. Mental toughness and resiliency. Putting yourself in difficult situations now is a good idea, and testing yourself to see what your threshold is, and see what your tolerance is for difficult situations. So, right now is a good time for you to test your mental toughness, because if something goes wrong, you can always go home and you have a hot house, with a stocked fridge and lights, So try to test your mental toughness somehow. Put yourself, if you have any kind of fears, try to overcome those fears now. Put yourself in difficult situations that, may be uncomfortable, or, painful even. I'm not saying that you should do anything that would harm yourself necessarily, but I think you guys know what I mean. Challenge yourself. And by challenging yourself and pushing yourself, that's how you grow, and that's how you get better, and that will make you just a much better prepper and a better survivalist after SHTF. If you're able to overcome situations, just using your mental resiliency, because the mind is the most powerful weapon we have. No firearm and no weapon is as powerful as the mind. The mind is the most powerful weapon, and if you're not preparing your mind for SHTF, you're going to be in trouble. And I think a lot of guys neglect that, because you could, like I said, you could have all the best gear, the most amount of preps, the best guns, but if you start going crazy and you lose it, you start making bad decisions, you start going crazy, then you're not going to make it, and same thing with the spiritual preps. Just be aware of the fact that there's things that are beyond your control, and surrender those things to Jesus Christ. Have faith in God and understand that you're part of a bigger plan. And so that's pretty much it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching. And remember the 3 P's: prepare, practice, and persevere. You prepare by buying food and water and essential gear. You practice with your essential gear, and you practice using it. And then because you've prepared and practiced, you're in a better position to persevere through SHTF. And as I said before, SHTF is going to be a huge mental challenge. So you have to mentally, persevere through the difficult situation that will be in SHTF. So that's pretty much it, guys. Remember, prepare, practice, persevere, and God bless, and I'll see you guys soon. Take care.